I took a long drag on a clove cigarette, the last of the bad habits I'd allowed myself. Well, unless you counted my fashion sense, which was now mostly limited to wearing heavy boots with office casual wear. Both were vestiges of when I was a goth, a fun phase of my life during college and early adulthood. I liked music and aesthetics, especially in girls' clothes, but I never liked angst, especially after I got together with Ellie. I met Ellie at the worst time in her life, a particularly bad time in her life. She had a long string of bad luck that started before she was born. Her mother, Gloria, was a drug addict, abusive when she was around, but mostly absent. She was raised instead by her father, Don, a high school English teacher. Gloria lured Don into a childhood trap. He was working on his master's thesis in linguistics when he had the misfortune to become infatuated with her pretty face and wild personality. She got pregnant with Ellie, and Don decided to do the right thing. It cost him almost everything: a promising career, a chance at a faithful wife, his health, and his self-respect. The only thing he has gained is Ellie. He considers it a more than fair trade. When are you going to stop smoking those things? I don't want you to get lung cancer, baby. I heard her pleasant voice behind me on the balcony. I wasn't allowed to smoke inside. You made me quit drinking and pot. You've already improved my life expectancy enough, Ella. I put out my cigarette and turned to her. Sue me. I'm greedy. I want to spend as many years with you as possible. She lifted up on her tiptoes and kissed me. I like the taste of you after you smoke them. I mean, I have time until I need to be at the doctor's office. I'd love to let you try me again. She bit her lip. Another time, sweetheart? I think I would have tired you out last night. I have to go to the store. I enveloped her in a hug and kissed her again. If you ever tire me out enough that I can't have another round with you the next morning, check to see if I'm a pod person. She pulled away and I slapped her ass. I suddenly remembered. Oh, do you want me to sign you up for a physical while I'm at the doctor's office? She lifted her head. No. Thanks, but things are all mixed up at work right now. I don't know when I can go. She grabbed her keys and headed for the exit. I've got a long shift today, honey. I'll see you tonight. I loved watching her walk. She was shorter than I was, like most people. But she was so graceful, and the flowing skirts and peasant blouses she favored always made me smile. Where I looked like what I was, a corporate IT chick losing the battle to retain a shred of individuality, she always looked like she came out of Haight-Ashbury in the late 60s. I smiled as I drove to my physical. Last night was great. Ellie had been very affectionate the last couple months, and in fact she had always been affectionate. I knew there would soon be a downturn in that. It had been the order of the day for almost as long as I'd known her. Sometimes I worried that she might be manic-depressive, but she didn't like the thought of being on medication. It wasn't a big change, and her slumps only lasted a few weeks, but I worried about her. I guess that was the order of the day. I was usually worried about her. As I said, I met Ellie at a particularly difficult time in her life. She'd had a rough childhood. Her father, who was always struggling to make ends meet and therefore often absent, and her best friend Derek were the only bright spots in her life. Derek was from the next street over. He'd had a similarly difficult childhood, and they'd bonded over it. They were friends, then dated when they got to high school. They were each other's first, and Ellie thought they'd be together forever. But Derek was of a different opinion. He was a very talented guitarist and not a bad singer, and a pretty good songwriter. When they were in their 20s, he had to choose between Ellie and his dream, and he chose his dream. She took it very hard. If Derek couldn't wait to hit the road, Ellie wanted to settle down, have a home and a family. She longed for the stable life she hadn't had as a child, and hoped that Derek would eventually decide he wanted that too. When that didn't happen, she fell into a deep depression. Ellie was smart. She had received an academic scholarship and was immersed in her studies. She loved poetry and writing, and was working on an English degree when I met her. It wasn't a very pleasant introduction. I was a fun-loving goth, struggling to pass my computer science exams and partying too much, and she was a diminutive, depressed hippie girl trying to get over her first breakup. We ran into each other on campus. Literally. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going. Truth be told, I was hungover from the night before, and I tried to keep my head down so I could get as little light in my eyes as possible. She was distracted by a message, and we crashed into each other. She got the worst of it, dropping her books and laptop on the floor. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Watch where you're going, asshole. I held out my hand. She grinned, but took it. We started packing her things. The books were fine, but when she tried to turn on the laptop, it didn't work. Damn it! I can't afford to get this fixed. Why the hell didn't you watch where you were going? Why the hell didn't you? She began to cry. I'm not good at showing emotion. I'm pretty reserved with my joy by default, but that's mostly because demonstrative displays of emotion make me uncomfortable. I had a hard time growing up. My family are loud people, with big voices, big opinions, and big feelings. I often wondered if I was adopted, but I looked like a younger version of my dad, so it was pretty unlikely. Hey, it's okay. We'll fix it. How? I can't afford it! I just said that. Are you going to pay for it? Here. I took the laptop from her. Let's go find a place to sit and I'll look at it. Inside the student union, I found a relatively clean desk and began to inspect it. The case wasn't cracked, the screen was fine, there was no obvious damage. I pulled the battery out and put it back in. Nothing. What are you doing? Troubleshooting. It guy. Give me a minute. I pulled out my multi-tool and started removing the case. Hey, hold on! Don't break it! I sighed. Listen, what's your name? Ellie. Ellie, great. I'm Tim. This will go a lot faster if you don't yell at me. This isn't the first laptop I've repaired. I held out a tenner. Why don't you get us a couple drinks? Mountain Dew for me? She hesitantly took it and walked away. While she was away, I got down to business. I opened up the case and found the problem pretty quickly. The cable had come loose from the motherboard. I fixed it, put the case back in place, and started the unit. By the time she came back with her drinks, it was already on the lock screen. Ta-da! I swung the screen around to face her. Oh my God! Really? Her relief was palpable. Everything should be fine now. Just a loose cable. I finally got a chance to really look at her. She was beautiful. Tense, but beautiful. We were oddly similar, both light-skinned, with blonde hair. She had green eyes and I had blue eyes. No one would have mistaken us for siblings, but cousins? Quite possibly. Oh, thank God, she exhaled. I'm sorry I yelled earlier. I've had a few bad months. I shook my head. No, it's okay. I should have been more careful. I tried to think of a way to get her to stay and talk. I didn't know much about her other than she was pretty, but it was college and I was a guy. That was enough to start with. Well, I guess I should too. She smiled and went to get up. Wait! Here, let me text you my number, just in case there's a problem later. Nice one, Tim. She raised an eyebrow but still gave me her number. I guess I didn't look that bad. It was college and she was a girl, and that was reason enough for her too. It's not exactly a love story for the ages, but we started chatting, then became friends, then friends with benefits, then lovers, and on down the chain until we got married a couple years after we met. We were a funny couple, a happy goth guy and a moping hippie, but the longer we were together, the less she moped. I met her father a few months after we started officially dating, and he thanked me for being a stabilizing influence on her. After dinner, Dawn took me aside and confessed, I haven't seen her this happy in a long time. She's finally starting to think about the future in a positive way again, and I can't thank you enough for that. I ended up becoming close to him too. By the time we were married, he started calling me son, which was very nice. He related to a lot of emotions the same way I did, and in some ways I felt more kinship with him than I did with my real family. After we were married, I started calling him Daddy. Ellie was his only child. He was thrilled. I eventually began my corporate career in information technology as a humble network technician. There was a good starting salary, and Ellie and I had limited needs, so she was able to stay at her college job at a real, honest-to-goodness physical bookstore. She loved paper books, vinyl records, and every other medium that survived mostly through nostalgia and stubbornness. Her schedule was constantly changing, but we still found plenty of time to be together. During the time we'd been a couple, her attitude toward Derek had changed. At first, she hated it when she talked about him at all. That was fine with me. No guy likes hearing about his girlfriend's ex. But over time, her attitude softened. He started to get some success, mostly at the indie small label level, but eventually got some airplay. The music industry spin finally landed back on singer-songwriter with a guitar-based backing band. One day we were listening to the radio in the car and it came on. I wanted to turn it off, but she made me leave it on. She took my hand and kissed it. It's okay. Derek finally got his dream and I got mine. I'm glad he's happy. Recently, we've been talking about having kids. We had been married for almost 5 years. I had been promoted to a leading role, and it might soon be time to take the boots off. We were financially stable and wanted to have kids while we were still young enough to chase after them. Ellie stopped taking the pills. We hadn't tried, but we hadn't tried either, and it had been 4 months. I talked to the doctor about it at my physical, and he suggested I get more tests. Just blood drawn at one of the diagnostic centers that specialize in that so far, rather than the more interesting stuff when it comes to infertility issues. I had the morning off, so I went to the nearest cafe, which was a few miles away. By the time they were done teasing me, it was nearing lunchtime, and there was a new cafe nearby that Ellie and I had been wanting to visit for a long time. I decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I was about to enter the restaurant when I saw Ellie and Derek, and they were kissing. I felt like I was out of my body. That couldn't be. Someone must be playing a prank on me. A prank, one of those stupid YouTube stunts. My wife couldn't. Oh my God. I staggered as if I'd been hit. I shook my head. I had enough sense to pull out my phone and take a few pictures, then I stepped back, numb with shock. I walked half a block, turned a corner, and sank down on a bench at the bus stop. I couldn't think. My mouth was dry and I felt like I was going to throw up. An elderly woman saw my condition and seemed to ask if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. She could speak Swahili if it would do any good. I texted my boss and told him I wasn't feeling well. I had eaten something. I somehow made it to my car. I couldn't drive yet because I knew I was going to have an accident. Suddenly, I discovered the value of big emotions. I started screaming with rage, pounding on the steering wheel, screaming about this cheating whore and her douchebag boyfriend. I yelled and screamed and howled in pain until I was hoarse. Then the tears came. How could she do that? Why did she do it? He left her. I was there for her, but why? Why? I put my head on the steering wheel and cried until I couldn't take it anymore. Then, drained of color, I started the car and drove back to our apartment. I packed a bag. Not mine. Hers. My name was on the lease. I paid all our bills. We didn't have kids, and I would never touch her again. It was over between us. I considered having a beer, but the damn cunt made me pass on the alcohol. I remembered her shit this morning. Oh, honey, I want to spend so many more years with you. Yeah, so you can cheat on me while you entertain your ex. Or, I guess, no longer an ex. I didn't know when she'd be back, only late. I couldn't be here anymore. Back in high school, I loved running, loved the gym, loved martial arts. Another atypical thing for a goth. I hadn't practiced any of them in a long time, but now I just needed something to do. Something physical to take my mind off the emotional. I pulled my old pair of sneakers out of my closet, changed into shorts and a t-shirt, and just started running. I was out of shape, but I was probably also in dissociation, that fugue state where you can make your body do so much more than it normally can because you've lost touch with yourself. I didn't know exactly how long I had been running or how far. I had the muscle memory to know how to run at a pace that would allow me to go as far as I could. But I had no conscious awareness of where I was running and why. When my body finally made it to my brain that a breakdown was inevitable, when my lungs were burning, my muscles were burning with lactic acid, and I just couldn't go any further. I slumped against the wall of a building in some unfamiliar part of town. And just stopped. Stopped running, stopped thinking, stopped being of any significance. After an indeterminate amount of time, my brain finally turned on. It was already getting dark. I had no idea where I was. There were no familiar landmarks, none of the buildings had businesses I recognized, and I had abandoned my marathon far enough away from any street sign to see them at dusk before the streetlights came on. Whoever says you can't run away from trouble just didn't try hard enough. The super smart IT. Guy finally remembered that he lived in the 21st century. I pulled out my phone and checked the map app. Jesus. I walked almost 7 miles before I fainted. It's amazing what existential dread can drive you to. And then, oh hell yeah, it was my feet. I rose to my feet with a groan, feeling tired and sore and blistered. Uber. Yes, I would take an Uber. My driver Amir and I stopped at the grocery store on the way to my apartment, and I bought us both dinner. Just a sandwich and chips, but still. Being a gig worker sucked, and I wasn't going to have kids, so why not buy the dude a sandwich? I had money. I grabbed the wrapper too. Amir could see I was screwed up, and he was dealing weed on the side, so score. Hustle culture wins. On the way out, I flipped through my text messages. Oh, how nice. Ellie had let me know she'd be late. I wonder what she's up to. Probably just crashing at work. Or crashing at work. Or on the desk. On the asshole's couch. On our bed. Holy shit! Once I reached my complex, I dragged my exhausted body up the stairs as carefully as I could, carefully taking steps as my body screamed at me for the abuse I had inflicted. It was pretty slow, but I was getting the hang of it. It turned out that the turtle had lost the most important race. Aesop would have been disappointed. Damn it! I sank down onto the couch. For the first time in almost 5 years, I was drinking beer with dinner, and it was delicious. It was beer water, and it was still the best damn thing I'd tasted in ages. The flavor was like a senseless rebellion when I drank poison to mess with my wife. I liked it. Smoked a joint at my new dealer and huffing and puffing, made my way to temporary bliss. About 2 hours later, Ellie came in, sniffing the air. Is that grass? Jesus, Tim, what are you doing? What happened to you? I hadn't had time to change into my sweaty clothes. I was tired, beat up, smelling bad, and slightly tipsy. Also, pretty damn high. Amir's shit was good. Oh, nothing. You know, the usual, how was your day? She was really making it hard for me to relax. Tim, you're scaring me. What's going on? Ding, 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 here comes the gong. Time for the fight to begin. Tell me, Ellie, how long have you been having sex with Derek? She turned white as a sheet and began to stammer. I think your starter is jammed, Ellie. Care to take a second to figure out exactly how you're going to lie to me and start over? Damn, I should argue with the high level more often. She began to think frantically, her mouth opening and closing. I pulled out my phone and opened the Photos app, then dropped it at her feet. Let's just skip the lying part, Ellie. I stopped by the cafe to see if it would be okay for a date with you. I snorted with amused indignation. Sounds like it. I looked at the floor. So, how long? Tim, it's not... I was on my feet in an instant, adrenaline and rage overriding the red warning signals my body was throwing out to my brain. I was in her face, sputtering saliva with rage. How? Long. Ellie. She pulled away from me and began to cry. 2 months. I just shook my head. 2 months. Well, that's just brutal. Her voice timid as a mouse's. This time. This time. This. Time. 2 syllables. 8 letters. And that's all it takes to destroy my world. My brain began to piece it all together, all at once. Derek was a touring musician. Ellie had been in high fondling mode for 2 months now. She went into this mode sporadically, 2 or 3 times a year, a month or 2 at a time. After that, she would go into a slump for a week or so. This went on until, oh God. Oh God! Before we were even married! I don't know if it was exhaustion, the beer, or just the sudden shattering of reality as I knew it, but I couldn't stand on my feet anymore. Jesus, Ellie. Jesus! I squeezed past her into our bedroom, trying to get there before my legs gave out. I succeeded, barely, falling to the edge of the bed and wrapping my arms around my head. 6 years? 6 years you've been cheating on me? Why? We got married, Elle! You married me! The tears came with renewed force, stronger than before. It was one thing to think that my wife had fallen out of love with me. It's quite another to find out that she never loved me at all. She followed me into the room and knelt down in front of me, trying to catch my gaze. Because I love you, Tim. I still love you. You're the best man in the world. I started laughing. I couldn't help myself. Tears rolled down my face as I gasped with laughter. I couldn't even respond. Her voice became more insistent. Please, Tim. Please. I mean it. You're the best man I've ever met. You make me feel safe and loved. Please, I need you to. That's when I snapped. I need you out of my life. You worthless, cheating bitch. Stop standing here lying to me. Get your bag and leave. She gasped and reached for me. What, Tim? No. No, I'm not leaving you like this. I don't want you to hurt your... I batted her hand away and she went over her knees and fell on her ass. I'd never raised my hand to her before. I'd never raised my hand to a woman at all. Hell, unless you counted martial arts in high school, I hadn't hit anyone since I went into 4th grade. Shit, Elle, I'm sorry. I stopped. No. Damn it. I shouldn't have hit you, but you shouldn't have tried to touch me. Did you think you could get away with it? That I'd still want you after that? How big of a slut are you, Ellie? I'm not a whore! Anger suddenly flashed in her eyes. She jerked back. I was too stunned to block her path. It was Ellie. She couldn't even kill a bug. She always took a piece of paper and put them outside. I felt her hand slap my cheek, a loud, genuine slap. The gloves were off. I hadn't touched her once before today, but it seemed like a good night. Adrenaline rushed through my head again, even as the warning lights in my head began to go from flashing red to black. I grabbed her arm. She stumbled, but I just dragged her behind me, grabbing her suitcase on the way out of our bedroom. Our bedroom. What a joke. Tim, please! Stop! I wasn't the strongest guy, but Ellie was tiny and scared. She struggled, but she didn't have a chance to fight back. We got to the front door and she started to beg. No, Tim, no, please, I'm sorry, I love you, please, we need to talk, baby, Don't even try it! My voice became a roar, and she drew back like prey trying to escape a predator. I was Tim, her baby, her love, her plush toy. She didn't recognize the man she saw. Good. She was beginning to understand how I felt. I opened the apartment door and threw open her suitcase. Our neighbors were already starting to stick their heads out. I shoved her inside. She stumbled and fell to her knees. I grinned at her standing in the doorway. You'll get the rest of your shit later. Have your father call me, I'll make arrangements with him. I don't want to see your face or hear your voice anymore. Tim, wait, my purse! It was lying by the door. I grabbed it, opened it, and pulled out my keys, then threw it at her. Not at her, but at her. But my keys, I need to... I paid for it. It's titled in my name. It's no longer yours. But how am I going to get to Dad? Damn insolence. Call your dad, call your boyfriend, call a cab. Hell, go try haggling on the corner for bus fare, whore. I don't care. I slammed the door shut. I yanked the deadbolt as she pounded on the door, begging me to let her inside so we could talk, begging me to give her the keys, begging me to give her someone she'd never really appreciated. I slid down the door, grief rising in me. Shame for letting my emotions get away from me, for the rage that almost... God. I almost hit her. In that moment, after she slapped me, I almost hit her. I didn't want to be that person. I began to grieve anew, not only for the loss of my love, but for the loss of my self-esteem. All the warning lights in my brain went black. The gauges went from high to low. I couldn't stay upright, not even sitting up. My body rolled onto its side, and I fell asleep to the sound of the most important person in my world banging on the door and crying. Beep, 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 beep. Where? Oh, shit. Shit! Why does everything hurt? Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh. Oh my God. Ellie. Oh my God. Oh my God. I slowly got up and sat up. My neck and back felt like I'd been in a car accident, and my legs were shot through. But my hands were still working. I managed to pull my phone out of my pocket and turn off the alarm clock. There were text messages from Ellie, of course, and from Dawn. Dawn was full of concern for me. It was very touching. Some fathers would start harassing me, telling me how I had hurt their daughter, but Dawn just wanted to make sure I was okay. But I guess he'd been through the same thing. Ellie asked for almost everything. A little anger at being kicked out, but mostly pleading, Please talk to me. Please don't do anything rash. Please don't hurt yourself. Please don't throw us away. It's a little late, Ella. I was going to be late for work. At this point, that was a given. I limped to the bathroom and stripped off my clothes. She reeked of sour sweat and pot. So did I, for that matter. I peed in the shower and washed myself thoroughly, then brushed my teeth. My jaw ached where Ellie had hit me. The guy looking back at me from the mirror looked like Ed Norton from Fight Club, just before he got into a fight with his boss. I hope that doesn't happen today, but it's been a week full of surprises. I got to work almost half an hour late. I could barely walk. I looked like I had been mugged, and I was sorry it had only hurt so much. My manager Al came over to my desk to see why I was late, but recoiled at the sight of me. Jesus, Tim, what happened? Few things are more humiliating than collapsing on my desk at work, but most of them have also happened to me in the last 24 hours. Al gave me the rest of the week off. He was a decent guy and already divorced. In his office, he sympathized with me. He'd caught her in bed with a guy 10 years younger and 50 pounds lighter than him. At least you don't have kids, Tim. I know that's no consolation right now, but you can just cut her out of your life. With a manly clap on my back, he sent me out into the world to do nothing. It was the middle of the week and the middle of the day. All my friends had work to do. My body was wrecked with running and grief. I was trying to figure out where to go. I had no appetite. I was too distracted to enjoy a movie. I hadn't yet reached the day drinking stage. There was no way I could repeat yesterday's run, and with the way I felt now, I wouldn't be able to for a week. I sat in the car and procrastinated until I finally accepted that the only place to go was home. I started researching divorce in our state. We had no children, few assets, and little real estate. It was a community property state, so she would probably get one of the cars, all her books and records, clothes, and half the cash in our account. Maybe some alimony. Whatever. It was a good deal to get rid of her. Hell, I could start the paperwork myself. I sat down on the couch and started flipping through Netflix, looking for something entertaining enough to distract me, but not so good that I wanted to taint my memory by watching it while I was still so upset. I hadn't decided anything yet when I heard a knock on the door. I was expecting to see Ellie. Or maybe Don. I opened the door and Derek said, "Dude, I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted to meet you." My fist clenched, and I started to feel rage, but then I just couldn't. I was so tired. Exhausted. It was another insult thrown on a pile of insults, and I was crushed under the weight of them. This asshole with a neck tattoo and messy black hair that must take half an hour to style was a pickle on the shit sandwich of my life. All I could do was laugh. "Can I come in? I think we need to talk." I was still laughing, and that was what made me twitch. This is what my life had come to. We were on the 3rd floor. The stairs were open, and it was only 20 feet away. I thought, why not just pounce on him? You've got half a foot and 30 pounds in you. The other one said, you could just jump over him. The last one, the really crazy one, said, "You've been on this ride quite a bit. Why don't you see where it goes? Invite him along. You can always kill him later." I just turned my back to him, still laughing, and beckoned him in. He came in reluctantly and sat down in a chair, and I flopped down on the couch. "Okay, asshole. You think we need to talk. And I think you just walked into the apartment of the man whose wife you've been entertaining, and he's standing between you and the door. So you better say something really great or you're going to fly out the window." Derek wasn't like the sharpest tool in the shed. I think he was the kind of guy who really felt everything. The kind of guy who understands how hard it is, brother, who feels your pain. He was counting on his contrived soulfulness to help him get through it, just like it probably helped him get into girls' underpants. "My girlfriend's pants." He sighed. "You're angry. I realize that." I snorted. "Oh, do you realize now? Do you realize how angry I am that my wife cheated on me with you before we were even married? That I only found out about it because I saw her sucking you off in public? That I've wasted almost my entire adult life with some whore who has fun with a Jack White knockoff when my back is turned? Oh, but I guess only when you come back from tour. So I get her the rest of the time. Lucky me." He looked at me pained. "Yeah, man. Yeah. You're lucky. You can have her in your life all the time. I'll never have that." I snorted. Well, you can start right now, Derek. She won't be in my life anymore, so you can take her off my hands. Oh, wait, you already did. He bowed his head. No, I couldn't take her out of your hands. Even if you were done with her, and I don't think you are. I don't care what you think, asshole. Even if you're done with her, I can't take her away from you, kid. She'll never leave you. You're the man she needs. I think that even if you can't get her back, she'll never be with anyone else. Good. Entertainer. He looked at me. I know you're in pain. I know we hurt you, man. I'm sorry about that. I wish we hadn't. But please don't take your anger at my weakness out on her. Your weakness? What the hell does that mean? He looked out the window, the same one I'd threatened to throw him out of. When I left Ellie, man, it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I loved her. I don't think I'll ever love another person as much as I loved her. But I loved my dream more. I always wanted to perform on stage, play guitar, and sing. And at first, that was all I wanted to do. I growled, "Good for you. Get to the part where you decide to ruin my life." He nodded. Ellie was my muse. I knew that. But I hoped that the memory of her in my heart, the pain I felt when I left her, maybe it would be enough to inspire me. It was for a while. But then it stopped. After we got back from the second tour, I started trying to write new songs. But nothing was coming out. I just couldn't, man. Ellie wasn't around. He lowered his head. I knew I couldn't be what Ellie needed. But I hoped I could be her friend. I went to see her at the bookstore. She was so mad at me, and I knew I deserved it. But I apologized for leaving her the way I left her. Not for dumping her, we both knew that was a lie. But for doing it so suddenly. And anyway, you know Ellie, man. I snorted derisively, but he ignored me. She's so kind. So forgiving. We went out for coffee to talk. Talk, of course. I rolled my eyes. He looked at me. It was just a conversation, man. I promise. She told me about you, about how you made her happy. She was sure you were the one. I shook my head. No, dude. I'm not fooling you. I knew that look in her eyes. It was love. She felt it for me, but I knew it paled in comparison to what she felt for you. You. I saw tears in his eyes. You were going to give her everything I couldn't. I was so happy for her, man. His voice cracked. So jealous of you. You were supposed to be her fairy tale. I was just the guy who couldn't keep her. There was contempt in my voice. Get away from me with your pity party and get busy. He nodded. After that, I came home and was able to write again, really write. The songs were good, better than the ones I wrote when Ella and I were together. But I was starting to run dry again. I called her and asked if we could talk some more. At first, she didn't want to. She didn't want you to worry about her. I had a great time entertaining her the first time I left. I know that. I know you picked up the pieces, dude. She didn't want to put you through that again if I dumped her as a friend, too. That's why she didn't tell you about us dating at first. We started by meeting for a cup of coffee. Then she came to my house to listen to some new songs. Then we had a few drinks and... Yeah, no, I get it. Then you entertained my girlfriend. Or was she my fiancée by then? He looked away. Not yet. She was so guilty after that. She wanted to run straight to you and tell you everything, but I convinced her not to. Told her it would kill you. It's my fault. Everything. Especially what happened afterward. There was suffering written all over his face. Real suffering. The guy seemed frankly too stupid to be a worthy actor. I knew I needed her. Needed my muse, yes, but I needed her in my life. I didn't realize. I convinced myself I could do without her as long as I had my music. But I couldn't. I was greedy. I wanted to have everything. A week later, I went back to see her at the bookstore. I played her the songs I'd written after he couldn't look at me. God help me, I tricked her. Convinced her that as long as she was all she could be with you, she could still be my muse. That we could still be together sometimes, that she could still help my writing. Man, we did so much for each other when we were younger, gave so much to each other that that it just made sense. For her. For both of us. She felt guilty at first, but, it just became normal, you know? It had nothing to do with, "If you finish that sentence, I'll break your damn neck," it was said coldly. Without emotion, and it was the absolute truth. He stopped and nodded. Yeah. Yeah, you're probably right. It sounds like nonsense to me too. But we've convinced ourselves it's true. I I convinced her of it. It seemed that way because nothing happened. You didn't find out. The world didn't explode. It was just the way our lives worked out, and you were both happy. I was happy too. But it was a shitty thing to do to you. It was a shitty thing I made her do to you, man. But please don't punish Elle for it. I laughed again. Punish her. Like I'm punishing her for staying out past curfew. She freaking cheated on me, dude. Terror suddenly appeared on the horizon of my mind. Did you even use protection? I hadn't even thought about it until that moment. My brain was too focused on the pain to think logically. Oh shit, I should have gone for a test. He paused. First, I missed the feel of her. I told her I'd be celibate for the last month on the road. Take a test when I get back. Make sure you were safe. She insisted on it. That was years ago. We were so far apart that, it seemed normal. He spread his hands as if in those empty, outstretched palms, I would find the answers to why my wife had allowed a touring musician to enter her. Oh my God! I would have thrown up if there was anything in my stomach. Get out. Just get out of my house. I stood up. I had plenty of time to rest, to let my batteries recharge. The anger was coming back. Wait, dude, please, I'm begging you. Don't punish Ellie because of me. I've known her since we were kids. I knew what buttons to push, how to play on her sympathies. I'm the bad guy here. I am the bad guy. I know that. But please, please. I'm begging you, man. You're her dream. You're a good guy. You're her good guy. She's always called you that. The best man I've ever met. Please don't take that away. Please don't take your love away from her, man. It'll kill her. He started to half stand, but I'd already grabbed him by the collar. I dragged him to the door and threw him out the door. I was good at that. Tell that whore I'll bring her the papers for her signature soon. I slammed the door in his face. Back on the couch, I just stared at the ceiling. I still loved her. That was the real bitch of it. Now I hated her. I never thought I could hate her, but I loved her. If she'd told me about it, if she'd come to me before I found out, if she had confessed and cried and apologized and begged, maybe I could have gotten over it. But this finding out like this, oh God. I needed someone to talk to. Someone other than her and that asshole. Someone other than my big, noisy family. Someone who had been through it. Someone who knew everyone involved. Someone I could rely on, if not impartial, then fair. I grabbed my keys, got in my car, and drove off. Hi, son. Don enclosed me in a tight, loving hug. I started to cry, and he held me at arm's length. Hey now. It's going to be okay. We'll figure this out. He led me into his house. He had already made coffee and poured me a cup, creamy and sugar-free, just the way I liked it. Back when I was a goth, I would have said pale and bitter, just the way I like my women. That all changed when Ella came along. I loved her cuteness when she stopped being gloomy, though she'd probably been getting her sugar elsewhere for a long time. We sat at his kitchen table, the same one I'd sat at with him when Ellie had introduced us. I'd asked him for her hand, too. It might be old-fashioned, but he appreciated the gesture. I sat for a while, gathering my thoughts. He gave me the freedom I needed, but he was always there as a comforter. Finally, I was ready to talk. He talked to Ellie, knew I kicked her out. Knew why, what she'd done. But he didn't have a lot of details. I told him everything I'd learned from that asshole. He only shook his head sadly. I thought I raised her better than that. I'm sorry, Tim, you deserved better. He took a deep breath. Have you decided what you're going to do yet? I took a drink and thought for a long moment. I don't know. I'm incredibly angry. I hate her, but I still love her. But I don't think that's enough. I can't trust her anymore. He was thoughtful. I don't know. No, I understand why you're looking at me like that. But he raised his eyes to the ceiling. Ellie is not Gloria. I know you came to me for advice, but I want to start here. Gloria was always a snake. I don't like to speak ill of the dead, but she was. He looked at me seriously. Gloria was a drug addict. She cheated me, ripped me off, trapped me in a marriage because she needed someone she could use and abuse. She never loved me. Ellie's not like that. I know it's hard for you to understand right now, but she's not. He paused, trying to decide whether to tell me what I needed to know. Then he nodded to himself. Son, I love you. I'm going to tell you something that not many people know. Ellie is not my daughter. Not my biological daughter, anyway. She's a sandy blonde like me and otherwise looks a lot like her mom. I just assumed, even when I found out Gloria cheated on me. I didn't find out until I was 8 years old when she was in a car accident. They were trying to determine her blood type, and there was no way she could be mine. It's biologically impossible. Oh my God! Don, I'm so sorry. He smiled good-naturedly. Thank you. I was hurt then, but by then I realized it didn't matter. She's my child. I will always love her. DNA is just DNA. It doesn't make us who we are, not really. It's just a part of us, and how we're raised is what's most important. I've always felt that way. Don's voice broke off. And I'm sorry, son, I didn't raise her right. I know she's a sweet girl. She's loving and smart, wouldn't hurt a fly. Deep down, she knows right from wrong. But she's always been a little gullible. Too trusting. And Derek. The pain on his face was obvious. I never disliked the boy. He was a good friend to her, and they supported each other when I couldn't raise her the way I needed to. It made her dependent on him. And when they started dating, I knew he would break her heart. I was secretly glad when he did. I thought she would be free of him. I recognized his type. He's not so much a bad guy. I snorted derisively. I'd like to see who you think is bad if you think he isn't. He frowned, not at me, but at himself for not keeping Derek away from his daughter. He's weak. He's a weak boy who thinks he's a man. He's needy. Artistic. There's nothing wrong with being artistic. I teach English, and I know that art is one of the highest aspirations of mankind. But he has gotten it into his head that he needs the worship that comes with art, not the joy of it. I understand that. No one likes to think he's shouting into the void. But it has made him selfish. He feels that the world owes him. His eyebrows furrowed in a frown. I want you to think about your conversation with him. How much of it was about Ellie? Really about Ellie? And how much of it was about him? I replayed the entire conversation in my head as best I could. It was pretty much all about him. About how it was all his fault. About how he couldn't have her. How he manipulated her. He apologized and asked me to take her back, but it was all about him and what he did. I assumed it was being done so I wouldn't blame her, so I would blame it all on him. Don frowned. That makes sense. The guy's got a bit of a martyr complex. It has to do with ego. Everything good that happens is because of him. Everything bad that happens is because of him too. Like I said, a boy, not a man. He took a deep breath before continuing. I'm not going to try to tell you what to do. That's up to you. But I will say that I think you can trust Ellie. Derek is a manipulator. I think she already knows how badly she screwed things up. I know she loves you. What she did to you was awful. But I know she loves you very much. Anyone who sees you two together can see that. I wouldn't call you son if you were just her husband. You deserve it for being the best man you could be to her. And I want you to know that even if you can't stay with her, I'll always think of you as just that. I started to cry. Thank you, Daddy. I couldn't speak. Emotions robbed me of my voice. He patted my shoulder. If Ellie leaves him, I don't think she'll ever fall under his influence again. And no one but you has as much influence on her as he does. He looked away and said quietly, sadly, including me, I suppose. But then he took a deep breath and continued. I can't lie to you. If it were up to me, you'd go to Derek, take her hand, tell her never to see him again, and go back to your old life. See a therapist and find a way to move on. You were so good to her, and I think she was good to you too. But I can't say it's right for you. She's not Gloria, and you're not me. But I will say one thing. People will tell you that you have to forgive her to move on. But that's not quite right. I forgave Gloria so I could stop hating her. So I could try to be a good father to Ellie. But I didn't do it right. He took a sip of coffee. I've always loved linguistics. The way words fit together, the way languages evolve by borrowing or discarding fragments from other languages, or removing rough edges they no longer need. Sometimes this is a good thing. English doesn't have gendered nouns, so we don't have to deal with LA or L. But we also don't have a second-person plural. You is supposed to have a dual function. So many other words have appeared to fill this need. Y'all, use, yuns, etc. Language is always imprecise. It is inherently an attempt to convey ideas in a concise form. But that means that in English, we simply don't have words for all the things we need to say. That's why we import words like schadenfreude from other languages. But we don't have, or at least I don't know, a word from another language that we can use in place of forgive for what we are talking about in recovering from the harm people have done to us. Some people use the word accept, but it has its own connotation. None of them are appropriate. I didn't realize this when I was younger. I forgave Gloria in the Christian sense, in the forgive and forget sense. I let her back into my life, but I did it without any preconditions. I trusted her, or tried to. When she let me down again, she threw my forgiveness in my face, tried to use it as a get-out-of-jail-free card. She used it as an excuse to continue her bad behavior. And my well-intentioned forgiveness led to her dying in her apartment with a needle in her arm. He looked me in the eye. I don't have words for what you need to do. Forgive is too slippery a word for that. You need to be able to let go of your anger. I heard you straightened her out. I started to open my mouth. Don't. You shouldn't have done that, and you know it. I know you'll apologize. I also know that I did the same thing to Gloria. It was wrong. Our anger doesn't make it right. And you can't keep it inside or it will kill you. You might end up hurting people. He paused, cringing at what he would have to say next. If you can't be with Ellie, it could end up hurting the woman you love next. So yeah, learn to let go of anger. Forgive her if that works for you. But don't forget or give her any favors for what she did. I hate to say this, she's my baby. But she needs to learn from you what she hasn't learned from me. She needs to realize that her actions have consequences no matter how she was manipulated. That doesn't mean you need to scorch the earth, but don't take it back without protecting yourself either. Don't be me, son. I nodded. So, what do you think I should do next? Don smiled. I think you know. There's only one person in all this that you haven't talked to. Shit. I was hoping you had another option. He stood up, and so did I. He put his arms around me. It was always meant to come back to you and her, son. There's no avoiding it. I left and texted Ellie. She replied almost immediately, agreeing to meet. But she insisted on meeting at Derek's place and having him there. He was afraid I might hurt her. I hated to admit it, but he was right. I didn't like what it said about me, but I couldn't deny it was true. If things had gone wrong, if feelings had flared up, I would hate her now as much as I could. The next morning, I found his building. It wasn't as shabby as I expected. I know musicians don't make a lot of money. But it wasn't some firehouse. On the contrary, it was an old warehouse converted into apartments. I knocked on Derek's apartment door and Ellie answered. She was so beautiful. She'd always been like that. My heart melted when I saw her puffy eyes with red rims. She looked like she wanted to hug me. 3 days ago, I would have already enclosed her in my arms, promising to do everything I could to spare her pain. But now I was the source of her pain as much as she was mine. But not the cause of it, that was on her. And the catalyst for our pain lurked in the room beyond the door. Elle timidly said, "Hi. Please come in." She stepped aside without touching me. The space was exactly what one imagines when one thinks of a touring musician's apartment. Cinder block shelves, a coffee table with a spool of cable, milk crates for storage and extra seating. Ratty chairs and a couch, possibly from thrift stores, possibly from a dumpster. Brick walls and bare flooring completed the look. I wondered if I would get hepatitis just by standing in this room. There was a whole scattering of guitars hanging on the wall, maybe a dozen, and a few more on stands scattered around the room. I knew nothing about guitars and only a little more about music in general. I can't hum a tune in a bucket. But I still realized that I had thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars worth of music equipment in front of me. My master sat at one end of the couch and my wife at the other. I secretly wondered how often they entertained here. When Derek sat down, he gestured to a chair. I considered obediently staying on my feet, but my legs were still jacking up. I sat down on the uncomfortable, tattered chair and decided I should have kept standing. We all looked at each other. This was my meeting, so I figured I should start. I heard what Derek said. I know how I feel at the moment. But, Ella, I thought I should give you a chance to speak up. She sighed. I was trying to do that when you told me. No, stop. Stop, damn it. You can't play the victim. At all. At least not when it comes to anything I've done. As soon as you do, I'm walking out the door and I'm contacting a lawyer. Do you understand? It was a bad start. I was already pissed, and she wasn't showing any signs of realizing how screwed up things were. She nodded reluctantly. I'm sorry. I know I hurt you. I did. But it's been hard for me to admitting who I am. What I've done. How badly? She wept. How badly I hurt the best man I've ever known. My husband. She sobbed. I sympathized with her a little, but she started off on the wrong foot. I gave her time to gather her thoughts, and then I said, Just say what you have to say, Ellie. She took a deep breath. There's no excuse for what I did. Derek manipulated me, that's the truth. He looked uncomfortable, but not as much as I would have liked. But I let it get to that point. I should have warned you right away that I was seeing him. I should have told you when I cheated, to give you a chance to walk away from me if you couldn't let me try to make it up to you. She lowered her eyes. But I can't apologize for marrying you. For cheating on you, yes. It was wrong. And I should have let you know that I cheated on you before I married you, like I said. I should have stopped immediately. But I love you so much. You're my everything. Apparently not. She reacted as if I had slapped her. I wondered if it would have been kinder. You! Yes, I slept with Derek. And I'm not going to lie, I enjoyed it. I felt grateful to be his muse. He looked at me in a way that you never have. I knew he adored me, but he knew he would never again possess me, all of me like you. I was his unattainable girl, the one he... Cut the crap, Elle. You were clearly quite attainable. I don't want to hear about how sorry you are because it seems like the only thing you really regret is getting caught. I lowered my head. If I hadn't caught you, how long would this have lasted? For the rest of our marriage? Derek said, No. No, man. Ellie wanted to come clean to you. That's what we talked about at lunch that day. I rolled my eyes and Ellie said, Yes. I know you have no reason to believe me, but it was the truth. I was going to tell you about it tonight when I got home. Of course. That's why he ran his tongue down your throat in the middle of a cafe in broad daylight. Obviously, the shame became too much for you. Why the hell should I believe a word you say? Derek gave Ellie a reassuring look and she turned her face toward mine. We were ending our relationship. This was supposed to be our last time together. I'm pregnant, Tim. What? My head spun. It went from a nightmare to a hellish vision. She nodded. It's been a month and a half. She watched me calculate in my mind and said quietly, Yeah. It could be Derek, but we're both hoping it's you. I put my head down on my hands, trying to make the room stand still. I took a few deep breaths, focusing on the floor beneath me, trying to regain my balance. Derek said, Hey, do! Shut up. Shut up! Staggering, I rose to my feet. I needed the pace. I needed the pain in my legs to help me focus on the pain in my heart. So what? You were going to come home and say, Hey, baby, I'm warning you, I'm pregnant, and it might be from the guy I've been dating behind your back for the last 6 years? Did you think it would go better than this? She didn't look at me. I was going to confess and apologize. I know you're a merciful man, Tim. I'd do anything to make it up to you, and I know you don't want to hurt me, even though I hurt you so terribly. You're so good. Stop telling me how good I am, I shouted, and they both recoiled back. I'm sick to hell of people saying that, like it means they can spew shit at me and expect me to leave it unanswered. God, you selfish bitch! And you asshole! I wish I'd never met you, Al. I walked over to the wall of guitars, looking for a place to lean against for a moment to think, to come to my senses. I saw Derek tense up. I don't know about guitars, but I do know what a collector's item looks like in a place that takes pride. In the center of the wall was a guitar signed with a dozen names I didn't know, next to a numbered 37100 card. It looked expensive. Expensive. Irreplaceable. I lifted him off the wall and Derek started to get up. He yelled, "Dude, wait!" But I had already lifted him over my head with both hands and swung at his neck like an axe trying to cut a hole in the floor. His neck splintered and broke, and his body shattered into a dozen pieces. His mouth hung open. Did that make me feel better? A little. But there was a whole wall of those damn things waiting for me. I expected him to scream, yell, howl like a child. But he surprised me. He picked up a small, rusty guitar from the stand next to the couch and slowly walked over to me, holding the instrument in both hands as if paying homage to it. Here. This one will be next. It's the first guitar I bought myself after high school. I played it until I could afford something better. The one you broke was my rarest, but this one means the most to me. He bowed his head. Smash them all if that's what it takes. But please, please, please. Don't hurt Ellie. Take her back. Let her have her fairy tale again. He expected me to feel remorse, that it would be a great romantic sacrifice for her, but it only made me cringe. You asshole. He looked up. What? Assholes like you think love is about such grand gestures. Songwriting, ostentatious displays of affection, big dates, all that stuff. And it matters. The big things matter. But the little things matter more. I brought the chipped guitar fingerboard up to his chin and tilted his head so he was looking me in the eye. Ellie tensed up on the couch. When was the last time you brought a girl chicken soup when she was sick? Made sure you paid a bill she forgot without making her feel like crap about it? How about just making sure she always had a roof over her head and food on the table? Rubbing her feet when she was having a rough day, not because you hoped to entertain her afterward, but just because she needed it? Huh, asshole? He was silent. That's what love is. That's what love is in marriage. It's reliability, trust, respect. Sometimes passion. You try to maintain that. I thought we did it. I guess not. I turned back to Ellie. But I guess we didn't have any at all, huh? Maybe this asshole has the right idea. Maybe it's all about finding out how many girls you can get to drop their panties by being the peacockiest. Because it's not like our marriage has been anything like that, even from the beginning. She spoke up. It's not? Respect, Ellie. Can you say you respected me? Having sex with your ex behind my back? Dependability? Well, you could rely on me, but I certainly couldn't rely on you. And trust, I shook my head. Yeah, I can see where this is going. I lowered my neck and started to walk away. She cried, "What about the baby?" I turned and looked at both of them. Seeing them together, him standing and her sitting, I understood. I realized they were telling the truth. She was going to confess to me because she had to. Ellie and I were mirror images of each other. Tall and broad, short and petite, but both pale and blonde. Different eye colors, but close enough in appearance to be cousins. Derek had olive skin, curly hair as black as coal, and eyes only a tone lighter. My voice blazed with cold fury. You never would have told me if you hadn't gotten pregnant. She moved awkwardly. You never would have told me if Derek looked like us? If you could hide what you did, you'd have done the same thing Gloria did to Don. You'd be a cuckold, a real cuckold, letting me raise someone else's child. I looked at Derek. Which one of you realized you had to tell me? He looked down and then at Ellie. I nodded. Well, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. She looked at me with fury. What did you just say? You slept with me. You were going to make me raise someone else's child. I pulled my wallet out of my pants and pulled out 2 20s, then walked over to the table across from her and placed them on the table. Here, find a dealer. Then you can be just like Gloria. I couldn't have hurt her more if I'd done it physically. She opened her mouth to moan but didn't make a sound. She knew. She knew I was right. She had become the monster of her childhood. She would never be the person her father had raised her to be because there was too much of her mother in her. Because Don let Gloria get away with his cruelty under the guise of being a good husband. But I wasn't her father, and I wasn't going to save her. Her fairy tale was over, and she deserved it. I turned and started to walk away. I felt Derek's hand on my shoulder, her black knight trying to stand up for her where her white knight had failed. Dude, you can't talk to... I turned around and put my fist right in his face. Martial arts was a long time ago, and I hadn't practiced in years, but I could still land a simple punch. He fell backwards, and I kicked him in the side, my thick boots bruising him and possibly breaking a rib. He rested his hand on the ground, trying to get up, and I saw red. He had stolen my dream from me. Now I'm going to take it back. I lifted my leg and brought it down with all my might, once, twice, 3 times. I heard the bones crack and break under the last knot of my unspent youth. He screamed in pain and disbelief, his arm mangled almost beyond recognition. I spat on him. We weren't even, but this was the closest we'd come. Ellie was beside him before I even got to the door. Of course she did. Of course she took his side again. I was just her husband. She was screaming, "Why, Tim? How can you be so cruel?" I only shook my head as I opened the door. You're an inspiration to me, Ellie. I think you're my muse too. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.